There comes a time in history when a nation refuses to bow, refuses to be told what it can and cannot do. A time when the last invisible chain, the one you can't always see, but you can feel in your spirit, gets broken. Today, that nation is India. For decades, Western powers have tried to keep her in check through politics, economics, and influence. They wanted her to play small while they played big. But now, that era is over. India just broke the final chain, and when that happened, it wasn't just about economics. It wasn't just about politics. It was about pride. It was about standing tall in the world, finally saying, "We don't need your permission anymore." And Dyer realized her true power. There comes a moment when you stop underestimating yourself. For years, India's potential was whispered about in boardrooms and conferences, but whispers don't move mountains. One day, India woke up and decided, "We are the mountain." That's when everything changed. It's not that the strength wasn't there before it was, but sometimes you've got to see yourself differently before the world does. That shift happened when India stopped measuring herself by Western yardsticks and started writing her own measurements. When a nation realizes its true power, there's a change in posture. Shoulders straighten. The walk gets slower but heavier. Every step says, "We belong here." That's exactly what the world saw, a new confidence that couldn't be hidden. For decades, the West wanted India to believe she was still a developing student in a global classroom. But now, India's the professor. She's no longer asking to be heard, she's setting the curriculum. True power isn't about controlling others, it's about controlling your own destiny. India started making decisions that prioritized her people over Western approval. That was the beginning of independence in its purest form. The world saw the population, but India saw the potential. The world saw challenges, but India saw 1 billion opportunities. That's how vision works. You stop focusing on what's wrong and start building on what's right. This awakening didn't happen overnight. It came through years of struggle, through every farmer who worked the land, every entrepreneur who took a risk, every scientist who refused to be ignored. All of them were building towards this moment. The chains that held India back weren't just political, they were mental. The belief that we can't is more dangerous than any foreign policy. Once that belief died, the final chain started to crack. The world was comfortable with an India that didn't realize its worth. But when India saw herself clearly, the comfort zones of others started shaking. You can't keep a lion in a petting zoo once it realizes it's the king of the jungle. This realization was about ownership, owning the land, the voice, the decisions, the vision. When you own your future, nobody can sell you back your freedom at a price. India's true power is not just in technology or military strength. It's in unity, 1 billion people deciding they're done playing small. When that many hearts beat in the same rhythm, the world hears it like thunder. Now, the tone of global conversations is different. The world isn't talking to India anymore, they're talking with her. That's what happens when you realize your value. You stop taking instructions and start setting terms. And here's the truth. Nobody gives you power, you take it. You take it by refusing to accept less than what you deserve. India didn't just break a chain, she walked away from the entire cage. When a nation sees herself in her full light, no darkness can convince her she belongs in the shadows. That's the beauty of realizing your true power. It can never be unseen. And once the world sees that you see it, the whole game changes. Breaking free from economic dependence, freedom without financial control is an illusion. For decades, Western powers held a leash not with armies, but with money. Aid packages, trade deals, investments all designed to look generous while keeping control. India saw through it. She understood that dependency is just slavery with better branding. And so, step by step, she began building her own economic muscles. It started with self-reliance in key industries. Manufacturing, technology, agriculture, the backbone of the economy had to be strong enough to stand without foreign crutches. That's when the tide started turning. You can't claim to be free if another country decides the price of your bread, your fuel, or your medicine. India broke that cycle by producing, innovating, and exporting on her own terms. The West didn't expect it. They were used to India being a buyer. Now India is a seller, and not just of goods, but of influence. Economic freedom changes the way you negotiate. Suddenly, you're not desperate to accept whatever's offered. You can walk away from the table, and walking away is often where the real respect begins. Breaking free economically also meant investing in local talent, instead of waiting for foreign corporations to save the job market. This wasn't just business, it was dignity. Every factory that opened on Indian soil, every tech company that stayed local, every farm that fed its own people, all of it cut another link in the chain of dependence. The final chain wasn't made of steel. It was made of contracts, interest rates, and debt. When India stopped signing away her future for short-term relief, that chain shattered. Economic independence is a statement. It says we are no longer for sale. And when a nation says that, it changes the balance of global power. This wasn't about shutting doors to the world. It was about opening them without letting anyone own the keys. Partnerships, yes. Subservience, never again. Now, when global powers approach India, they do so as equals. And equality at the table means nobody's eating off your plate without permission. Money was once the tool used to control. Now it's the tool India uses to lead. And the beauty of this transformation is that it was done in daylight, for all to see. Economic freedom isn't loud, it's steady. It's in every paycheck earned without foreign debt, every innovation built without foreign approval, and every export sent with pride. When the chains of economic dependence are broken, a nation doesn't just survive, she thrives. Taking back cultural identity, control doesn't always come through armies or banks. Sometimes it comes through telling a nation her culture isn't modern enough. For years, India was made to believe her traditions were outdated, her languages less valuable, her art a relic. That's how control works. It starts by making you ashamed of what makes you unique. But the moment India took back her cultural identity, something powerful shifted. Instead of chasing Western validation, she began embracing her own roots. That's when the chains of cultural dependency began to fall. You see, culture is power. It shapes the way people think, dream, and live. When you own your culture, you own your narrative. And owning your narrative means nobody else gets to tell your story. This wasn't about rejecting progress. It was about defining progress in an Indian voice. Whether it was Bollywood influencing global cinema, yoga becoming a worldwide phenomenon, or Indian festivals lighting up cities across continents, the message was clear. We are not erasing who we are to fit in. For too long, cultural imports were treated as superior, while local traditions were pushed to the side. But now, young Indians wear their heritage like armor, not baggage. That's when the real pride began to rise. Language, too, became a battlefield. The dominance of English once symbolized advancement, but now regional languages are flourishing alongside it. India decided it could speak in many tongues and still speak with one voice. Food, fashion, art, they stopped being just ethnic and started being iconic. The sari, the kurta, the masala chai, these weren't things to hide from the world. They were gifts to be shared. The West had been selling India's own heritage back to her at a profit. Now India controls her own cultural exports. That's not just economics, that's ownership of identity. Cultural pride isn't arrogance, it's confidence. It says, we know who we are, and we're not changing it to make you comfortable. This transformation was seen in schools, in films, in music, in the way Indian celebrities now walk global red carpets without shedding their roots. The statement was loud: tradition and modernity can stand side by side. When a nation loves its culture, it stops begging for acceptance and starts commanding respect. That's exactly what's happening. India's cultural revival is also a weapon against control, because you can't mentally colonize people who love themselves too much to trade their identity for approval. Every Diwali lamp lit, every classical song played, every temple preserved. These aren't just traditions. They're declarations of independence. Culture is the soul of a nation, and once a nation reclaims her soul, no power on earth can enslave her spirit again. Building global partnerships on her own terms, there's a difference between being invited to the table and bringing your own table. For years, India was only offered a seat when it suited the interests of others. Now, she's building alliances that work in her favor, not just theirs. Global partnerships aren't a problem, imbalance is. When one side dictates the terms and the other side just signs, that's not partnership, that's servitude. India decided those days were over. This shift meant choosing allies not based on pressure, but on principle. Nations that respected India's sovereignty were welcomed. Those that tried to pull strings found their calls going unanswered. Instead of waiting for Western doors to open, India knocked on new ones: Africa, Latin America, Southeast Asia, places where relationships could be built without the weight of old hierarchies. Trade deals stopped being acts of desperation and started being acts of strategy. If it didn't benefit the Indian people, it didn't get signed, period. Building partnerships on your own terms also means being willing to walk away. That willingness is power, because the one who can walk away is the one who can't be controlled. The West was used to India playing the role of a follower, but in recent years, they've had to adjust to a new reality: India as a leader in global forums, setting agendas, not just reacting to them. These partnerships are no longer charity-based or one-sided. They're built on mutual benefit, where both sides walk away stronger. That's the definition of respect. It's not about cutting ties with the West. It's about not letting the West be the only game in town. Diversification of allies is diversification of power. Now, when India enters a room, she's not just representing herself, she's representing a network of nations who believe in equal standing. That makes her influence exponential. Global partnerships on your terms require a strong sense of identity, a strong economy, and a strong will. India has all three now. The beauty of this approach is that it creates friendships, not dependencies. Friends don't own you, they stand with you. This isn't isolationism, this is independence. And independence in global affairs means nobody can box you in without your consent. The world now understands. If you want to partner with India, you do it with respect, or you don't do it at all. Rejecting Western narratives and control, one of the most subtle chains of control, is the story told about you. For years, Western media painted India through a lens of poverty, chaos, and need. It was a convenient narrative. It kept the world seeing India as a project instead of a power. But now India is telling her own story. And when you tell your own story, you control your image, your reputation, and your influence. Rejecting Western narratives isn't about denial, it's about balance. Yes, India has challenges, but so does every nation. The difference is, India's successes were often buried under headlines that only showed struggle. Now, technology and social media have given India a direct voice. The world doesn't have to hear about India through someone else's mouth anymore. This shift was about confidence. You don't need validation from those who never wanted you to rise in the first place. Western control often hides behind advice, reports, and ratings. But India stopped letting outside opinions dictate her policies or priorities. Rejecting these narratives meant building her own media strength, her own think tanks, her own research so that she didn't have to borrow perspectives from those who don't live her reality. The West was not ready for an India that could clap back with facts, figures, and undeniable achievements. But that's exactly what's been happening. This wasn't just about politics, it was personal. It was about the dignity of a nation tired of being misrepresented. The narrative is now shifting from India needs help to India is helping shape the future. That's a monumental change in global perception. You can't fully be free if you still let someone else write your script. India took the pen back, and with that pen, she's telling a story of innovation, resilience, and leadership. The world is now having to rewrite its old descriptions. When you reject false narratives, you force the truth to rise, and when the truth rises, control falls. The chains of perception can be heavier than steel, but they break just the same when you stop believing in them. Investing in her people and innovation, the greatest resource any nation has isn't oil, gold, or land, it's her people. For too long, outside powers convinced India that her talent needed to leave in order to thrive. The brain drain was real brilliant minds leaving home because the system was tilted against them. But that script has been flipped. Now, India is creating an environment where brilliance doesn't have to pack its bags. Universities, tech hubs, research centers, all of them expanding at home so talent can grow without borders. Investment in people isn't just about education, it's about opportunity. It's about making sure that a young entrepreneur in a small city has the same shot as someone in a global capital. Innovation is the currency of the future. The West understood this long ago and kept India in the role of supplier instead of leader. But now India is the one launching satellites, developing cutting-edge technology, and building products the world needs. When you invest in your people, you're telling them, you belong here, you matter here, you can build here. That's how loyalty to a nation grows, not through speeches, but through opportunities. India realized that every time her brightest minds left for foreign shores, she wasn't just losing talent, she was losing a piece of her future. That's why keeping talent home became a mission. This investment isn't only in scientists and engineers. It's in farmers, artists, teachers, and skilled laborers. Because a strong nation values every contributor, not just the ones with flashy titles. The result: homegrown solutions to Indian problems. Innovations built for Indian realities, not foreign theories. That's the kind of progress that lasts. The West didn't expect India to become a competitor in the fields they once dominated. But when you nurture your own innovators, you stop depending on borrowed ideas. This investment is also a form of self-defense. A nation that can feed itself, educate itself, and innovate for itself is untouchable. India is now producing leaders in every field, not just to work abroad, but to shape the nation from within. That's a sign of maturity and strength. When you pour resources into your people, you're planting seeds that will outlive politics, trends, and even generations. Those seeds will bear fruit long after the current leaders are gone. And here's the beauty: when your people feel valued, they fight for the nation that valued them. That's patriotism you can't buy. Innovation isn't just about gadgets and apps. It's about creating new ways to think, new ways to grow, new ways to thrive. India has stepped into that role fully, and the results are undeniable. Declaring to the world, India decides her own future, all the chains, economic, cultural, political, mental, mean nothing if a nation doesn't declare ownership over her destiny. And that's exactly what India has done. She has stood before the world and said, "We decide where we're going, not you." This isn't arrogance, it's sovereignty. Every independent nation has the right to shape its own path without foreign interference. But for decades, India's path was being drawn by other hands. Now, decisions are made in New Delhi with Indian priorities in mind, not foreign approval ratings. That's a monumental shift in mindset and policy. When you decide your own future, you stop chasing trends and start setting them. India isn't trying to catch up. Anymore, she's carving her own lane. This declaration is being heard in trade talks, climate summits, defense negotiations, every global forum where India now speaks with authority, not apology. The world is realizing that the days of dictating to India are over. Suggestions are welcome, lectures are not. Owning your future also means owning your mistakes and your victories. India is no longer hiding her challenges, but she's also not letting them be used as weapons against her. This kind of confidence shakes old power structures, because once a nation claims her own direction, she's no longer predictable or controllable. The West once held the illusion that India would always be a follower in global politics. Now, they're learning to adjust to her as a leader, and that's a hard adjustment for those who've been in charge for centuries. India's declaration is backed by action-building alliances, growing her economy, strengthening her defense, and investing in her people. Words without action are empty, but India's actions have made her words a global reality. When a nation takes control of her future, she becomes immune to the fear tactics of others. Threats lose their sting when you know your worth. This is more than politics, it's generational. Future Indian children will grow up in a nation that doesn't wait for instructions from somewhere else. They'll grow up knowing they are part of a country that stands on her own. And here's the truth: once you declare that your future belongs to you, there's no going back. The chains can't be reattached because the mind has been freed. India has spoken, and the world will now have to listen, whether it's ready or not. When you look at the journey of India, you see more than a country's rise. You see a masterclass in breaking every single chain that tried to hold her back. For years, the West believed they could control the rhythm of India's heartbeat, but now the drum is beating to her own rhythm, loud, unshakable, unstoppable. This isn't just about politics, economics, or culture. This is about the spirit of a billion people refusing to be told their worth by anyone else. It's about a land that has carried centuries of history, weathered storms of colonization, and still stood tall enough to write a new chapter, one that belongs to her alone. The final chain is gone. The invisible leash is cut. India isn't asking for a seat at the table anymore. She's building her own table and deciding who's worthy to sit at it. And here's the message to the world: you can't control a nation that knows who she is, owns what she has, and refuses to sell her soul for convenience. That's what real freedom looks like, not the kind that's written on paper, but the kind that's burned into the hearts of her people. India's rise isn't a threat to the world, it's a challenge. A challenge to other nations still trapped in invisible chains to look in the mirror and realize they too can break free. The West may have underestimated her for decades, but the time for underestimation is over. India is not emerging, she has emerged. She is not becoming powerful, she is powerful. And as she moves forward, unapologetically shaping her destiny, there's one truth every nation must now accept: the era of controlling India is over. The era of respecting her has begun.